Ready to roll, thank you. Well, everyone, it's Monday, August 31st, 6 p.m., and I'll call our committee meeting to order. You had a look at the agenda. Anything else that we need to be considering this evening? If not, Councillor Gulletson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll move the agenda as presented.
Thank you very much. Anyone? All those in favor? Thank you. I did hear from Councillor Jacobson earlier, and he had some family commitments, so he was unable to attend this evening, so we won't be expecting him. We've got Senior Manager Reyes with us here right now. So under committee reports, if we could take a look at the second quarterly financial statements, please.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. The report that Council is receiving for information tonight is the second report that we are bringing to Council, and it shows the financial results for the first half of 2020. By the end of June, about 50% of the budget is expected to have been achieved. In 2020, however, the year has been a little bit unusual, as you all know, because of COVID-19, and it has impacted operations and budgets across the city. As indicated in the report, the city is trending to have a surplus by the end of the year. The surplus, as of it's sitting now, is mainly due to a few things, including higher investment income. The main reason why we have a higher investment income this year compared to other years would be because we are actively managing the funds now. So currently we have $20 million invested, and right now we are, rather than putting them in GICs, we have them in bonds and different kinds of investments in order to generate a higher return, but still keep liquidity high and safety. In addition to higher revenue and investment, we know that some expenditures are going to be lower from now to the end of the year, such as travel and subsistence, right? And that's due to COVID-19, of course. There is less traveling happening these days. Training is another one that has been impacted by COVID-19, so we see that that's going to end up under budget, as well as some of the other professional fees, such as the service level review. Those funds will not be spent, so we can see that there'll be some surplus at the end of the year, and those would be some of the contributors. As part of that quarterly report, we also wanted to provide Council with an update on where we are at when it comes to tax and utility collections. As of the end of June 2020, the city has collected approximately 69% of taxes levied in 2020. And just for comparison, we have provided the 2019, which is 95%. So normally that's the tax collection up to the end of June, right? In regards to utilities, utilities is a little bit different because we bill monthly. Normally we bill approximately $1 million per month. And normally we have an arrears amount that we typically have. Like in 2019, at the end of June, it was $119,000. In 2020, it's $337,000. So it's almost triple the amount that you would normally see. And that is explained obviously by deferrals. Many of the residents chose to defer their utilities. So there is a higher balance owing as of now, I guess. And currently we are working towards collecting those funds. They have up to the end of the year to pay their utilities and have their accounts up to date. As of January, there'll be we'll be imposing penalties as we normally do. So they have been made aware of that, and again, you know, we expect that most of the balance will be collected before year end, but we also see a higher risk when it comes to having some uncollectible accounts more than other years, right? Because of the higher balances and the way the economy may be. Some highlights under the revenue, I mentioned the investment income is higher, so that's going to contribute to surplus. A little bit higher franchise fees also is going to be contributing. The utility revenue though is one where we see a decline, and right now the way it's looking like we may end up in a deficit in both in water and wastewater. So currently we are investigating what the causes could be. We know that it's been a rainy summer, and we know that could be a contributor, but we want to know if there is something else. So we'll be reporting back to council as we find out what could be. In regards to expenditures, because of the closure of public facilities in the second quarter, there has been an impact on personnel costs. So right now it's showing that it's under budget. That may change a little bit as we progress through the year, mainly because of the adjustment that we did, the spring adjustment. It may, when we did that, we didn't know how long it was going to be. So at the end, there may be some surplus, but it may not be as high as we can see in that report. Goods and services, right now showing under budget. However, because things are a lot more normal now than they were in the second quarter, departments are purchasing more, and they will continue to purchase more as long as operations remain the same that they are now. Therefore, we see that decreasing towards the end of the year. However, there may be a potential there for sure, because that's where training and travel sit. So we definitely think that there could be some surplus in there, unless other expenditures are impacted by COVID-19 too. When it comes to utility costs, we see them being close to budget by the end of the year. So we do not expect any major variances there. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Manager Reyes. Councilor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess it's great to see a surplus, but obviously the trend with COVID is our rentals for the LMC and all of our recreational facilities, our revenue could quite possibly eat up all that surplus quite quickly, could it not?
I may. So it certainly, it's possible. I think it's not likely that will happen. The greatest impacts would have already been reflected in these quarter two of the COVID closures, would have been already reflected here. And if you recall, we did make some adjustments to our projections for both expenses and revenue at the spring adjustments. So some of those, most of those effects will have already been reflected both in the budget and in this quarterly reporting. So it is possible because there's the months left in the year, but I am not expecting that. I genuinely expect that you will see a surplus at the end of the year, a small surplus. I don't know how much, but I think you are in a reasonably healthy financial situation as far as this year's expenditures and revenue go. That's not to say there won't be challenges in future years, but I think you'll be fine this year.
Manager Reyes, in the property tax and utilities collections sheet, you show arrears for 2020 of 378,000. So given that those taxes were postponed till the end of the year, is that carryover from the previous year then? Is why those arrears would have been in place?
Is that page number 2?
There's no page number on it, it's just property tax and utility collections at the top. And in arrears, it's 378,000, which is down from 2019, but given that we've elected to defer payment, really is no arrears accruing currently, so that's all carried over from the previous year then?
That is correct. That is from prior years. Tax accounts becoming arrears after the current year. So 2020 taxes become in arrears in 2021.
Okay, so in fact, the 378,000 there would have been carryover out of that 576,000 from 19.
Yes, that's correct.
And at what point do we take additional action? At what time period?
If I recall correctly, they sit in arrears for 1 year. The subsequent year, they go in what we call arrears list. So basically, if they are still remaining unpaid, they go on a list, and we put, I believe it's like a lien. We send information to land titles. So it's in arrears, in the arrears list. After some time, if they remain unpaid, then they would be properties that the municipality can sell after we give the final notice to the property owner as well as any lenders that may be on title.
I just thought it was important to ask the question because I didn't want any of our residents to somehow misconstrue the fact that there is a, however we want to term it, a forgiveness on arrears payments for the current year that does not apply to monies outstanding. It's not like there's just a hiatus on all fees. Chief Cody?
Yes, so I'm gonna be bold here and hope my numbers are right. If you had not paid your taxes from 2017, you would go on the arrears list for 2018. We would have given you a full year, but for 2019. And if they weren't paid, then by the end, we have as a municipality until the end of 2020 to take action up to and including the extreme action of repossessing a house and selling it, which has never done that, of course. But it's you have a significant period of time. So that if you haven't been paying your not you. If an individual, sorry, if an individual has not been paying their taxes since 2017, then they would potentially be facing foreclosure this year in the municipality.
And by these numbers here, we have no idea because of the way it's broke down what in fact those are from, but I just would prefer it was mentioned in an open meeting so that people didn't think that somehow we were saying one thing and doing another, that's all. Councilor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. So obviously then, so that's, you could not pay 2017 to 2020, is that what you're saying? Because of the time frame on the process? So all due respect, if you're in arrears 1 year, there are people that pay their taxes monthly. So then if you switch that account from annual to monthly, would that not speed up the process with you being arrears, say 90 days instead of the whole year? Could that process be, or is there an whole MGA that you have to follow by?
Yeah, the Municipal Government Act is very, very specific about the process that has to be followed before a municipality can take that action, because it is such an invasive and some would say rights overruling action for the municipality to seize someone's property and sell it. It's highly regulated, and so thankfully we haven't had to do it, and we did get close, actually.
Yeah, we were close, yeah. And with anybody that has taxes in arrears, we try to always convince them to enter into an agreement. When they enter into a tax agreement with a municipality, they are able to actually do that. Work arrangements to be able to clear their taxes for in the next 3 years. So it doesn't happen right away. It takes time, but they can make payments and knowing that their taxes will still be subject to penalties. In this year, though, they don't get the current year taxes, but in any other year, any penalties that apply would be added. So when we calculate their payment, we have that into account and we tell them that that's what the payment needs to be in order to be up to date in 3 years.
Councilor Gullikson?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I just have a question regarding the water payments. We have showing percentage on the user fees of 10.09, minus 10.09%. And then on the revenue side, it shows 1.17%. Is that in the water fees, the difference?
I wish that I could answer that definitively today for you. We think that that is a contributor for sure, the water leaks. But that is exactly what we've keyed to as well, is to say, well, water sales are down. Why isn't the revenue, why isn't the sales versus the purchases, they should all be down. It does not seem like our purchases from the regional commission have gone down in the way we would expect, given the closure of commercial facilities, the pool, some of our event center. Why our water usage, why is the city's water usage, and I don't mean the city as an organization, but as a whole, not really seem to be affected, and yet our sales are way down. And so unfortunately, we don't have an answer for you tonight, and that is just a matter of timing of when we've noticed this in vacation season, but we are looking at that very thing and considering a very disturbed, but a serious issue of like, we need to
Find out where it went.
Yes, we need to get to the bottom of that and see if there's a leak or.
Because this is the full 6 months.
That is correct.
So that would be the period of time when we had those leaks downtown and different
Yes,
things. So
yes.
there is some potential there for that, okay? And then, can we talk about the solid waste part of this too, this time? Sure. Okay, I was just looking at the user fees and I can get to it here, there it is. User fees on the solid waste is down. Is that the commercial percentages or something? I think it is on the revenue side. Like I'm looking at the wrong one here maybe.
Which page are we on?
I don't have pages on my.
Page 19, or it's 27 of the
Oh, yeah,
package.
19. Yeah, I just was concerned that, is it, are we looking at, on the commercial side of it, is that the issue there? Maybe something expensive. Yeah, it's the expense side. And it is user fees here.
So I think what you're seeing there is 18,500 in lower goods and services
Yeah.
sold.
Yeah, is that the commercial stuff?
I think it would be less commercial usage, so we did offer commercial customers the opportunity to pause their service with no fees during COVID. And so if people weren't operating, didn't want pickups, they may have canceled those pickups, but you'll see if you look at expenses. So we have a corresponding reduction for the solid waste requisition for our funding to others of 10,000. And so I think it is a small variance of 8,000 to the.
Yeah, I'm just concerned because I've seen recently where there's been a number of places switch over to private.
Yes, I think that is part of the issue.
Okay.
For sure.
But I just have a concern with that revenue source.
Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I did have a few questions. So of course, I'm cognizant of the fact that we are at Q2, so we're doing year-to-date budget versus actuals, but then we also keep in mind that there's the whole year's budget, and depending on when you make purchases, it can look like you've like gone way over, but actually you gotta remember to look at the whole year's worth, depending on when you make a purchase, for example. But I do have some questions. So on page 1 of the various departments, so this would be the fund category, general fund. Under expenses, it talks about allowances and cancel. And that one is considerably up from what it would be for a yearly budget. I'm just wondering what that would entail. So it's year-to-date actuals are 38,000 versus not quite 15 would be the yearly budget. So I'm just wondering what that category would be. It would be page 8 of the package. Otherwise, it's page 1 of the attachment to the memo.
Department 00, excuse me, the general fund.
Yes.
Unfortunately, because of the way it's printed, I see that there's 2 page 1s.
Yes.
One that looks like this, that says actual
yes.
budget versus year.
Okay, yes.
And then there's a second page 1 that says year to date. I
Yeah.
apologize for that oversight.
Okay, so the first page 1. So it'd be the very first line under expenses, and it's allowances and cancel.
I have to apologize because I guess we didn't provide an explanation for that. Because what we are doing is we are putting explanation for anything over 10,000. And I don't see an explanation on this one, so we'll have to get back.
Get back, okay.
So if I could, so knowing the processes I do, we asked for comments from each department head for their departments. The page 1 that you referred to, that is the general fund, is a roll-up of all it's a consolidation of all of them. And so we did not provide detailed, because it would be difficult to run. However, here, we should be able to say what comes up to allowances and cancel. I don't understand that term,
Yeah.
so we will find out what that is and
Okay,
make sure you have.
that would be excellent. All right, if I could continue.
Certainly.
So now page 4 of the attachment to the memo, which is 12 of the package. I don't mean to be picking at little things, but it is curious that printing and binding, again, considerably higher than what is budgeted for the entire year. And so I'm just wondering, like, what is it that we were doing, what we were printing, that we've already blown the budget and then some?
Year in review. Unfortunately, too many copies of the year in review were ordered, and it
Blew the budget, okay.
exceeded the budget.
And then another time, janitorial supplies. Now, I suspect that may have something to do with COVID. But again, already have almost doubled the budget and we're only at the 6-month mark. So again, I know these are relatively small numbers, but they're just jumping out at me and we might as well ask the questions. That's why we are given these reports. So any ideas on that one?
I think it has definitely to do with COVID. When we were buying supplies for COVID-19, we were still coding them to the regular budget line. The only difference is that we set up a cost center to be able to separate them if we needed. But in the reports that council is getting tonight, they are included in those reports.
That is correct. Yeah, all of the coding for any COVID supplies, even masks and such, we're going through to the janitorial supply.
Okay.
Right, so.
Okay, fair enough. Just a comment about Department 21, definitely watching that one closely. I don't have any questions on it, and I just want to see if I've highlighted anything else. Yes, so page 17 of the attachment, or it would be page 25 of the package. So I do notice this has the allowances and cancel, that same category that I was questioning in the very first page. And it's, again, we're looking at almost 24,000 year-to-date actual in account write-offs. This is in water department, which again is considerably higher than was budgeted. So I'm assuming that those are related then with the same sort of title.
This, sorry, this is Department 41, water.
41, yes, yeah.
That, yes, that would be due to the write-offs, definitely, yeah. We only budgeted 7,500, but as I was mentioning, this year we have more outstanding accounts. And we do expect write-offs to be higher than normal.
Okay. I think that is all the questions I have. Thank you.
Councillor Goldson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll go back to Department 21 for a minute and maybe Ruben can answer these questions. Like it's looking that there could be potentially $160,000 difference in, or 210,000, I'm sorry, in revenue. Have they looked at any potential changes as far as practices or layoffs over there that you're aware of?
Well, there have been, for example, due to COVID, we had some staff members, not sworn officers, but support personnel. Like there was one woman, for example, who took a leave of absence because she had to stay home.
Okay.
So there have been a few things like that. Not too many, to be honest.
If they do that, are they entitled to get this government programs?
It would depend on the individual circumstances as to why they needed to remove themselves. But if there was a bona fide health or family reason, then yes, they would likely be eligible for a number of programs. Again, on an individual basis, we could give an answer, but.
Yeah, just generally, if people are leaving, it would be nice to know that they're entitled to those programs, that's all.
You mean like SIR? Is that what?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, if they did it voluntarily, I didn't know if they did it on their own, that they would still be able to qualify. Yeah, good. So there are some things happening, because it's gonna be substantial. And I know we talked about this before, but I've seen them do more traffic control lately, myself personally, so I'm wondering if that has been a directive.
It's not been a directive so much, it's just a normal practice. Of course, there were less people on the roads for 2 months and now people are out driving and yeah, they're starting to speed again.
Yes.
I don't know, but
Yeah, I've seen a few more.
I've seen more of that too, but there hasn't been like a real, okay, let's
Push.
no.
Is it, I wonder, well, it doesn't matter, you will know that maybe about.
You couldn't, even if you did a push, you couldn't recoup those revenues.
Mhm.
If you did like an all out, everybody writes tickets for the next, you can't recoup the revenue you've lost. No, it's just, you can't do
It's too much. Well, and we get only 30, and I understand we only get 30%, is that correct, of a ticket?
Well, that's just, we don't get all the revenue.
Yeah, so if it's a $100 ticket, we get $30 or $35, is that right?
I believe that it is the province that withholds about 30. I think it's
Going
like
up to
plus 10 admin fee, but we could get you that answer. Diane, Director Piché, could you mark that and we'll send that out to council?
Probably sufficient to say that we receive only a fraction, 40% or something.
Yes, between 40 and
Exactly.
between 40 and 50. I think.
That we get, yeah, okay, that's good enough, that's fine.
Anyone else have any questions on the mid-year financials? Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just one area that you quite commonly hear, okay, for example, we shut down the curbside recycling for obvious reasons of cost, increased in 66% and so forth. Well, quite commonly here, citizens were, well, where did, you know, and I keep saying to them, well, we didn't increase your cost because we eliminated the service. Because in other words, it would have cost $535 a ton and Wolf Creek is 300. But yet some people still are adamant, well, where's the gap? Where's my tax dollars going difference? And maybe when a decision is made, I think we should try to get more information out to calm those with more information as to pertaining to where the numbers are at. So I reiterate to people, well, we would have had, it would have been $535 a ton if we would have continued forward with curbside recycling. Thus, it was eliminated, so that cost didn't incur. So, and it's just kind of, it's just a questions here in the street. Well, they don't know the numbers because like obviously I'm at recycling and I say to people, well, if we would have continued curbside recycling, it would have been $535. That's why we kept it at Wolf Creek. It's 300 ton. Your solid waste is 125, 150. A lot of people don't know that information. And perhaps we could do somewhat to justify when our decisions are made, where the numbers are different, and if there is a tiny bit left that doesn't justify to lower it, but it goes into reserve to do water main repairs or something that still need to be done. So it's just a suggestion, so.
Definitely, so the costs for curbside recycling, were any of those borne by taxation or was that a utility basis?
So that is a utility basis, and so I guess I did want to just, you mentioned putting money into reserve for water mains, it would be a little bit mixing the two. The challenge that we have, because I have run into that with my neighbors as well, to say, oh, well, so why did my monthly fees go down? I say, well, actually, because of.
They didn't go up.
Exactly, highlighted. Those messages actually did go out when we made the change. And this isn't to say, oh, throw my hands on it. It is a real challenge to actually get that message to people. Because even if you have it on your website and there's a news story on it and you radio it, I still run into my neighbors and they don't know.
I just, how do we do it better? Because I feel some people are confused a little bit. I don't know. And yet it was publicly put out. I'm not in no way, shape or form criticizing what we did because it was made public. It was done for efficiency reasons, and people for the most part understand that, but I try to reiterate to them, well, we didn't increase your cost because we didn't continue to provide curbside recycling. So.
Yeah. It's a challenge.
Manager Reyes?
So I would like to address Councillor Hibbs' question in regard to allowances in council. So what that number is the combined write-offs for all three utility departments. So yeah, we have been having more, like I said.
So utilities across the entire organization,
right? Yeah, all three departments, water, wastewater, and solid waste.
Thank you. You got it?
And so I would just point out that I guess the reason given in Department 41, or the amount that is over in Department 41, which is 16,000, is the majority of that variance on the front. So the two are larger.
Manager Reyes, thank you for that report. We appreciate it. You kept up to date on the financials. Thank you. The next item that we have before us, item 4.2, Chief Gowdy, in regards to the Parkland Regional Library.
So thank you, members of council, and thank you, Director Pichet, for putting this memo together in my absence. So this is actually the reason that this committee meeting was called by council. I believe Councillor Klonick had requested originally that we set a meeting to look at possible uses for the Parkland Regional Library. And I confessed to the mayor when this came about, and I said, well, you know, I have to say, my goalpost was really dealing with the two buildings that were rid of in the deal. And we felt that that was kind of like, that was the driver we were headed for. And so I have to admit that afterwards, I was happy to be down to just one building that didn't have a plan for it rather than two. We didn't have a great, here's the ultimate plan. So we were actually really excited when Councilor Connick asked us to all get together and look at possible options. And we did so over the last couple of months and talked about different things. And so we tried to coalesce those into a few really high-level options of what we looked at in your report. And we are really eager to hear more ideas as well and go from there. So I'm going to just start and I'll go through Director Pichet's memo rather quickly, because I'm sure you've had a chance to look at it, to the building. So we included this Manask Isaac feasibility study for a new civic center. This is a study that the city undertook after acquiring the provincial building that said, well, what if we use that building? The original acquisition, I would say, was made with the assumption that the building would be purchased, the provincial building, purchased, demolished, and a new city hall would be constructed, which was supported by the downtown area redevelopment plan, which highlighted the benefits of having a civic center in your downtown. Once the building was acquired and there was some assessment of it, and it was old in the downtown, there was a change to say, well, what if that building became our city hall? And so that's the context that this study took place in. There, the feasibility assessment, I think that some of the good things that I want to highlight. One of the things is, which I'll talk to later actually, is this criteria outline of what would make a good city hall. Here's what you want to think about when you're looking at a city hall. So adequate parking, good value. That's kind of of course you want good value. Room for future expansion, that sort of thing. And that's what we would look to for the fire hall as well, which I will get to later rather than specifically highlighting potential spots. So the important things there, I think, for me, were the size needs of the organization long-term. So just to reiterate what we had heard on our tour, this facility here is about 14,000 square feet at current City Hall. The Parkland Regional Library is about 21 to 22,000 square feet, it sounds like. And this report stated that an ideal City Hall for Lacombe, city size of Lacombe, would be 17,000 square feet initially, and then up to 2,100 or 21,000 square feet 25 years from now. And that was using per worker space requirements that were common in 2017. And I'm not saying there's been significant changes, but I think it is worth noting that recent trends have been to less space, more job sharing, more work from home, smaller workstations. So that I would say that 21,000 square feet is probably an upper limit for what you would need in 25 years. Next is the Parkland Regional Library Renovation Feasibility Study. This is a feasibility assessment that was done on behalf of Parkland Regional Library in 2017, I believe, by Group 2, December 2017, where they looked at whether it was more feasible for the Parkland Regional Library to renovate in their existing location or build new. And part of the issue there was some funding issues that they had of what could be applied towards new buildings versus renovations. So I wouldn't say necessarily it's fair to draw the conclusion that because group 2 says it's better for Parkland Regional Library to build new, that building doesn't have value and you should always build new. It wasn't the right building for them, given their funding circumstances and their needs and their. Then Diane provides an outline of the current city hall and some of the issues that we have and extra costs that we're expecting over the next few years. One of the challenges, of course, that this council is inheriting, as the last council did, this building has not been particularly well kept over the years, and so there hasn't been updates for many, many years. I would say in the last 2 to 3 years, we've changed that practice and started doing some updates and regular maintenance and trying to keep up with things, but you do have a backlog of issues from servicing, from the underground servicing right through to some of the equipment being dated and some of the spaces. A lot of the space is just not being ideal for our operations. So we have a lot of hallway space in this building. We have a lot of rather large offices, larger than are needed in many cases, but difficult to renovate to provide additional office space. We are at capacity here at City Hall, and so we already have spacing issues with the building. So I would say something will be needed in the near term, really, to be looked at. And you have set aside some money for things like replacement of the carpet here, replacement of some furnishings in the building that we want to make sure are spent the best way possible. There was a request, actually that's in the sorry, so we talked about the financing amount, if you wanted to finance any sort of upgrades, purchasing, selling for a loss, that sort of thing. And then we've got some estimated cost to complete the renovations. So here I want to stress that the Scott Builders and Shandos estimated costs per square foot were based on renovations of the police station, the former police station, fire hall, and provincial building, which are much more purpose-built buildings and much harder to renovate than the Parkland Regional Library. So you're dealing with jail cells and all sorts of much harder things, and so that's why there's such a range in their square footage numbers. But looking at the Group 2 recommendation for renovation, you'd be completely renovating that building for approximately $3 million. I think that's an upper limit of what you would need for the Parkland Regional Library, depending on the use, of course. There is some capital costs that were given. Those are 2017 numbers by an architect at the feasibility stage of a project. So I put very little value on that estimate or confidence in that estimate. But those are some ballpark numbers for you, $5 to $12 million for renovation or construction of a new city hall. So the options that we developed for the Parkland Regional Library building, and again, these are just very brainstorming session level detail that we're at here. Option 1 is to create an expression of interest to look at long-term rental or leasing of the entire space. That could require some sort of leasehold improvements or improvements by the city for that to work. That's an option. I think the whole issue with that building is that it's so large, and the way it's laid out, there are just very, very few potential occupants. And so you would need to find likely an institutional user of some kind, and none come to mind. We had looked at a partnership with the school board, but unfortunately, because of some of the financial challenges they're facing as well, that's not coming to fruition. So I think this would be a great option. If it were out there and easily achievable, the contractor who had acquired this building would have already sourced and taken this route. So that's, if there's something that you're aware of or that we hear of, we love this option of renting the whole building to someone long-term. That would be great. Moving into the more feasible, option 2 would be to look at short-term lease for all or part of the space. So over the years, City Hall here has rented space to other users, whether it's provincial bodies or other government agencies, renting an office or a couple of offices in space. I think that building does have pretty good potential to separate space out and potentially offer rental to some sort of other institutional government entity on a short-term basis for compartmentalized rental. That's going to pay for a very small portion of your overall operating costs of the building, but it would defray some from potentially and keep someone in the building, which I think has value. Option number 3 is to sell the Parkland Regional Library, and I think you need to be prepared to incur a significant write-down of the building if you do that. We do have a mortgage, it's not for the full value on that building, so I don't think it would be negative equity necessarily, but that building had a trade value, if you recall, approximately $1.9 million. I think you would probably see a market value in the range of 1.2 to 1.5 would be a more reasonable expectation. So you'd be looking at a significant markdown. However, that's not to say that's the worst option, because you will be spending significant money to hold that building over the coming years, even if you're not administratively. You like that option too. Simple. We just sell the building. Option 4, in the event that current City Hall was to be renovated, if you were interested in maintaining the presence at this location, then you can look at using that Parkland Regional Library as a temporary workspace as renovations are completed here to try and keep operations sort of consolidated and in one spot. So we know, for example, that a major renovation is of the downstairs bathrooms in coordination with the replacement of the sanitary sewer service out to the street. And so while that was going on, you could look to temporarily relocate staff. Option 5, put this in, just we did think of it. It would be to use it as a new fire hall. I think there's a lot of challenges with that, although the location, there's not any houses immediately adjacent. It's just not a good location to be going through school zones and the 5-way stop. And so we put it in there it's for discussion, but I don't think it's a great location. Option 6 is our, I guess, most well-developed option. And that would be to make the Parkland Regional Library act as your long-term City Hall. So you would look at, we laid it out in three phases. So phase number 1 would be to move parks over to that facility and construct a new public works at the location that we're going and designated for that. Once the public works location is up and running, then in phase 2, which is so you could look at locating additional staff over there. Or in phase 3, that what you would look at is moving all of your staff over there. Once the facility is renovated, move the entire operations, civic operations from this facility to the Parkland Regional Library building, which will be the new City Hall. That gives you the opportunity, then you have both public works in its demolished and ready for sale or redevelopment or use as a community use, and this facility, this building and site. So in that scenario, we would look at demolishing this building, demolishing public works, preparing the land likely for sale, just from a financial capacity standpoint, using the proceeds to fund all or a portion of the renovation of the Parkland Regional Library. The challenge that you have when looking at this building is that the municipality only has so many services and only needs so many buildings. Fire hall, public works building, an events center, rec center, and city hall. And so when we administratively are looking at that, we're not saying, well, here's some great new services you could run out of this new building. There's all sorts of great new services you can run out of that building if you want to fund them. But if you don't want to take on additional services that may be the responsibility of private industry or other levels of government, then you have to look at your existing services and what can be provided out of that building. It's not suitable for public works, it's not suitable for fire or rec, we did talk actually at one time about an event center, but there's just not the need for a second worse event center than the OMC. And so we came to the city hall option. I guess I don't want council or anyone watching to have the impression that we're like chomping at the bit here for a new city hall and we think this is our chance. It's marginally better than the building here, I think, if you put money into it and renovate it. But if you put this money and renovate this building, it would be better than it is today too. So it's an option. It's not a great option, but it does give you a use for that building, and it does have a cohesive plan with some of your other plans coming together to potentially have this land ready for repurposing, whatever that is, repurposing for community use, repurposing for redevelopment, whatever it is. So with that, we have provided the studies, we've taken the tour. We're here to help however we can. Let's open it up for hopefully some great ideas.
Councilor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So we did receive some certain amount of cash from the sale of the two buildings in the whole package of $375. So if you add that to putting it back to market value, we're still within reason of kind of getting out of the whole scenario of the provincial building. Like numbers wise, within reason, not at a huge loss.
Yes, I think we wouldn't have endorsed it if we didn't think it was within reason, and not just within reason, because yes, I think there is a financial loss, if you want to use that word, but I think it was in the city's best interest, and I still think it was in the city's best interest.
Oh, no, and I agree with you, but I'm just saying it wouldn't be as bad of loss to take it down to a market of 1.2 or 1.4 from 1.9. If you add in that 375, it doesn't make it look as devastating compared to still having the provincial building. So, but when you start to look at the citizens that are kind of have a vision of what they would like to see 5, 10, 15 years down the road, no, we could have another ice surface need based upon population compared to our 2 ice surfaces now. Sometimes I always think it's better off to build one bigger building to serve several uses rather than a whole bunch of different buildings. Like, okay, you're looking at $4 or $5 million renovation for that to make it functional, when really, it sounds ridiculous saying this, but 50 or 20 could get you a nice surface, a new city hall, someplace for the historical society items and a walking track or indoor lacrosse or soccer field or something. I'm just saying a vision like that, what citizens would kind of want to contribute to the whole community rather than $5 million to renovate that one old building.
So are you indicating a preference for option 3, sell this particular building?
I would just say sell it.
Option 3. Councilor Kodak.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I certainly don't think we should sell it. I think it's the proximity to other lands that we own, make it a desirable piece of the property just for that. The only reason I was brought this up and wanted to take a tour of this facility, because I've always felt that maybe we could use parts of it, much like the option 6, not use all of it, maybe use parts of it. I like the idea that parks could use parts of that garage. I think there's some potential there for sure. But I've always felt too that we need I would like to see perhaps part of that building be used for a proper council chamber. I mean, this is not in my mind, a proper council chamber anymore. The audio is no good, the vision, the sound is no good, there's things that I'd like to see, personally, I don't know if it can ever happen now, because we're years and years and years away from a new city hall, let's face it. I mean, we're just, I hate saying this every time, but when I was first elected, it was on the 10-year capital plan, now it's not even on the 30-year capital plan, and it's so far down the road. But if we could, have a proper council chamber there, Parks uses parts of it, then this room here, you could divide with the windows into 3 offices. I see that as potential there. But to renovate the whole thing, no, absolutely not. I mean, that thing is a hodgepodge of rooms but I think there's potential there to do some things. Those are my thoughts.
Councilor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I think the biggest value in the property is simply the location and its long-term vision. And what I would love to see, if I could just, spend any kind of amount of money eventually, would be answering some of the call of our residents that in the future, they would like to see, an addition to our rec center, so that you do have a field house, that you do have, so like an indoor facility that's, essentially a large gym, that you could do things like lacrosse or indoor soccer, or you could have that indoor running track, those features that we hear that other communities have that we don't have, but we can't justify the cost right now. But in the long term, I think those are kind of the next investments, and how better situated than to be right there. And again, I think of the beautiful pairing of a city hall being a large rec center and civic center being all one. I find that to be such a perfect combination. But again, that's long term, but I think it's important to be setting that up. Now we have the opportunity, and I think it was a wise investment, because again, I think that shows vision for the far future. We see that, I think, over and over again in this community, where we're so thankful that somebody had a great idea once upon a time and they acted on it. And people might have said that was silly at the time, but now it's one of our, greatest blessings. Like, for example, not exactly the same thing, but the murals, what an impact that had in our community. But somebody thought of that back in the day. I've seen pictures of downtown, what it looked like in the 50s, 60s. It didn't look very pretty. But again, somebody's vision sort of led us in the direction to, conserve and save our buildings. And now we're known for that, and we draw people here for that. So I think that this is another situation, well, not exactly a parallel, but the same idea that we're looking forward, maybe it's more than 10 years, so it won't be on the 10-year capital plan, but it's, on the 20-year capital plan. And you don't just get these opportunities all the time. And I think that while it may be a little bit hard to navigate, I think that there's potential of utilizing part of the building, like was mentioned earlier. I think there's great wisdom there, but I do think that it's wise. So that's just what I want to say about that.
Councilor Gallatin?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I also agree with Councilor Connick regarding the building. I think there's quite a bit of potential there for a possibility of a new council chambers. And I think if we have the building, we have it, and as we have it for a longer period of time, I think the vision can expand to other uses, like as far as office space, things like that in that larger area, depending on what we're looking for. And to keep the building, I think is something we should do, and utilize it for the Parks Department and Recreation. I think that's a great use for that building. Frees up a lot of space over at a rec center for the pool staff. And that really requires no renovation to start with, to move them in there. And there's very little to be done in that back section. And I think if we just take our time and look at that building properly, I think there'll be some vision in the future to utilize a lot of those spaces.
Councilor Oakeshire?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I don't really have any strong comments, but I have a few questions. Just for comparison's sake, how many square feet was the provincial building?
15,000.
About, okay. And then secondly, I heard the comment made, but we don't know what it's going to cost to keep that building lit and warm and,
We don't have those numbers as yet,
yeah.
but we will shortly.
I don't know if that's true. Do you have those numbers?
No, I don't yet.
No? Okay.
Because with the provincial building, we had a tenant that covered some of the costs that it was to the city. So now we have a building that there's no tenant and all the costs of operating that building will be ours. Is that correct? I guess I do support that it's a good location and all that, but I'm not sure I can see the use of the building. Anyhow.
We also didn't have a tenant in the old police station. Keep in mind that we swapped
Correct.
2 buildings for 1 building.
Right. That had no tenant.
Well, while I still strongly support the actions that we did take in consolidating these businesses and deals that we've struck, I have a strong preference for option 3 is to sell this facility. For a lot of the reasons that have been alluded here, not necessarily the same direction or thought. So I too would like to see some improvements to the facility, the room that we're in now. It's not very useful for public, which I think we all feel is important to have that option. There's lots of nights when there is no one here to make use of them, but having that option on those nights when it is likely would certainly be a great thing to have. I just, I think that we're gonna find that the cost of operating it to use a small portion of the building for very valid uses, for parks, for some vehicles, perhaps a workshop for maintenance staff, whatnot, especially from the rec center, are all valid ones. But I think that's gonna utilize a pretty small portion. Now, in saying that, if we're able to do that in the short term while we secure or look for potential buyers, I don't think that they're exactly gonna be beating a path to our door, but there's always customers looking for certain types of facilities that I have no problem with that. Someone had alluded to the fact that it would be expensive to do those upgrades. If it does mean that we have to start adding fire suppression and whatnot to the entire facility to make use of a little bit, this will not be worth it, I do not believe, because those are extremely expensive items, and we're still gonna end up with what is essentially an aged building that is of a similar era to this one. It's perhaps a few years newer, but I guess just to go through the other options, the idea of moving the entire city hall facility down there would be extremely hard to swallow for me. This is, we would spend a tremendous amount of money and have very little of an upgrade for a small portion of what it would cost to renovate that entire building. To pick away at a few things here, which I've been doing over the past few years, I think is going to be a far more usable one. And in saying that, is this structure ideal for City Hall? I think you'd be hard pressed to find many people that would say that. But it is more suitable than that building for City Hall. And I think there will be someone out there that can make very good use of that building. I just don't think that it's the city of Tacoma this time. I do like the location for, given its adjoining to our current location here at City Hall and the recreation facilities. But other than that, I have a strong preference for option 3. Councilor Wickstrom?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So, CO Gowdy, when you were presenting this, did you indicate that the previous owner had looked to try to sell it? So you did not indicate that, okay, because, okay. I was just wondering if it had been tried, someone had tried to sell it, then what's the likelihood of us being able to sell it?
Sorry, just, so my comment was, I think if there was a leaser, someone who was going to rent the whole facility long-term, that the previous owner, they have their ear to the ground, they would have found that likely. So it wasn't that they tried to sell it and weren't able to sell it, so I didn't make
Councilor Hibbs.
Just have one more quick question. I should have thought of this earlier, sorry. Thank you. What's the value of this property to sell? Like, for example, especially if it were rezoned to something that you could build residential on, for example, which I would imagine would be the most desirable in this location. Has that been considered as well?
So I just wanted to respond that we did try to pull those numbers together in time for this meeting. But that was basically what we were thinking when we were looking at option number 6 is we'd want to know the saleable value of this land and if that value would be enough to put into that building to cover its costs. So that we would not be putting extra money into that building. We'd actually be using the money from this land to fund the improvements over at that site. So that was the idea. Now, we don't know, there's some concerns about reclamation costs over at the public works site, which is why we need an answer at this point. But that was basically the foundation for option number 6 at this point.
So my apologies, I thought that maybe was done by now, but they didn't get back to us.
No, we tried, and we ran into just a couple of flags.
My apologies, today is my first day back, so I haven't connected on everything, so sorry to put you on the spot.
No worries.
Just a quick follow-up, sorry.
Go ahead.
When I'm asking the value of this, like I realize that the ideal situation would be public works and this parcel selling, but what if we're just talking about this parcel on its own? Because it's probably a similar size to the Parkland Regional without actually looking on a map, but.
I think we'd actually have to subdivide the lot. I think it's one big parcel at this
Okay.
point is what we would have to do. So again, to answer your question, I think we could actually decide how much we wanted to carve out if we wanted to do that. But to your point as well, if we set this as residential and probably on the higher density side of things,
It would be, for sure.
the value would go up significantly.
And was it specifically just for the land value for that purpose that you were more interested in?
I was just curious because we're talking about selling, the other property, and we're also talking about selling these properties, but that of course is contingent on the fact that Public Works moves, and of course there's going to be, there's going to be remediation required over there. But just to keep it a bit simpler, what if you're just talking about just this individual portion of the entire?
Do we know how many acres this is?
I was gonna say, I think that's a relatively easy thing to come up with based on an area cost for the land.
Investigation
Yeah.
required.
Sure.
Totally.
I apologize if that's simplistic, but I just thought we hadn't really
No,
separated that out.
Keep in mind,
Wanted
there's
to have
also,
that information for you tonight.
there is a parcel adjacent to us here, just south of the Ball
Ball
Diamonds as
Diamond.
well, which is ours as well.
I think that would certainly be a hypothetical number, given the likelihood of moving City Hall and then foreseeable future are relatively small. But it certainly could put a number to it if that would help in some decision-making for sure.
Sure, thank you.
Councilor Conick?
Thanks, Marcus. So I'm just wondering with steps going forward then, I mean, obviously there's no motions or anything coming out of this tonight, but, well, I mean, obviously we're gonna try to find out what the utility costs or what the costs are in that facility are. Is this something we might see before the end of the year, coming back with some sort of decision, or what's your feel on that? I'm just wondering.
So we're trying to get those costs so that we can include them in for your budget deliberations, of course, for next year, for your operations. If we get any solid indication here tonight, then we would probably try to look at some capital options, if there is a capital component. With the capital budget, of course, if the option selected or if the direction sort of get is option 3 to sell the Parkland Regional Library, that's a different thing. I would say once we have this, we will probably bring another memo back at a future meeting before the end of the year. Ideally timed kind of with your budget discussions, that presents the 2 options that we're hearing support for, if there is 2. And that's, I'm just trying to gauge what I'm getting here. Right now, I would say, so far in tonight's discussion, I have heard some support for option 3, and I have heard some support for what I have deemed an option 7 or something, which is potential short-term use for parks and or council chamber development while retaining the building for the long term for a possible rec facility expansion or other municipal purpose in the future, kind of like a land bank scenario with some short-term use. That is sort of the two things if I'm trying to pull what I'm hearing. And so we would probably, we would give you a memo that would say, option 3, sell the building. Or this other hybrid option, which, Councilor Gullickson had said, well, you can move in for parks right now. Yeah, I bet you move in ready in that state still costs you 50 to 100 grand, I bet, just to get the doors ready and make sure everything's running. It's always more expensive. So I think there would be some capital components, and obviously a council chambers redeveloping that lower room where you had pointed out, which I think is the right location, would also have some, limited, but some capital component. And so we would bring that potentially for council's consideration in the capital budget for next year or a future year.
And you think you can get those sort of high-level capital costs within a 2 months period? Okay.
Councilor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Well, number 8 or 9 or whatever it may be is obviously Parks and Recreation would like a little more space to accommodate them and lease the rest of it, like to cover your operating costs at least. So it's not budget affected, like, because as Mayor Creasy alluded to earlier, I don't think there's going to be a lineup of purchasing in the economic environment to get that 1.2, 1.4. But if you can cover the areas of operation costs, other than the Parks and Recreation, to at least cover the budget affected in terms of additional operational costs to get a leasing.
So maybe rather than calling that a separate option, I would say this option
3A.
whatever that we're developing here is sort of piecemeal use, ad hoc piecemeal use that doesn't require significant investment on behalf of the municipality. Because I agree, if there's a need to suddenly be fire sprinklering or fire separating sections off, you'll never get the money back from these short-term rentals. But I think this option would be sort of a general ad hoc use while maintaining the building for repurposing at a future time. 2 of those potential ad hoc uses would be Parks and Recreation and council chambers. Short-term rentals, long-term rentals even of partial space would also be one of the opportunities.
With all due respect, but I mean, wouldn't you find it really inconvenient to directors, managers, staff to be going across there back and forth just for a council meeting? Like, perhaps we could relocate the council to the county room until this is renovated. I don't know, but it just seems kind of having 2 separate buildings for a function. I don't know.
For 2 meetings a month. I mean, I don't think it's too onerous for the.
I'm just throwing it out there that this is,
I don't think that's.
Whatever.
No, I obviously appreciate considering our impact, but because it is twice a month and we have no problem doing that, or whether it's use it suggested the LMC, that's fine.
Until you renovate this.
Yeah.
So is there some further indications at this point in time that you're requiring, or not really?
I don't think so. I mean, I've put out what we're gonna bring back for you. So if there's any members of council that say, no, I want you to also include whatever other option, let me know, and we'll do that. But otherwise, we're gonna be bringing back option 3 for sale, which will include some information as to what we could reasonably expect from a market value for that property, as well as will include some market value expectations for this property and Public Works. And then we will have another option, which is this ad hoc multi-use thing. We'll have a better name for it by then. But long-term, holding it for future municipal repurposing.
Very good. Thank you for putting that together and the 2 to see exactly how much space we're
Yeah, it's good.
was involved over there. We appreciate it. I'm sure council does. Our next meetings, as scheduled here at the bottom of your agenda sheet. For Monday, September 14th is regular council meeting. And then again on the 28th, two weeks later at 5 p.m. Monday, October 5th is a committee meeting at 5 p.m. And the 13th is a regular, of October, that is a regular council meeting. And then additionally, towards the end of the month, October 26th is our annual organizational meeting and regular council meeting, which are held one directly after the other, correct? Correct. Councillor Char?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. It's not Monday, October 13th, it's Tuesday.
Thank you very much for that, day after the holiday.
Thank you.
I think that's all the business that we have other than in camera this evening.
I'll make that motion to go in.
Motion made by Councillor Connick to go in camera at 7:15. All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
Just